please join me in welcoming the President of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping. Thank you. I'm John Frisbee, President of the U.S. China Business Council. Thank you all for being here. Housekeeping item, if you have your cell phones with you, please put those on mute. There are headphones at the tables for simultaneous interpretation. With that, I would like to welcome Governor Jay Inslee to the podium.
Ni hao and good evening, President Xi and other honored guests. On behalf of 7 million Washingtonians, it is truly delightful and an honor to welcome you here and the members of your esteemed delegation. We are honored that the state of Washington has been chosen for this visit. Your visit marks yet another milestone in the long and deep and productive history of the state of Washington with the people of China. Other noteworthy milestones include when China's first cargo ship docked in Seattle in 1979, or the fact that Washington is the home of the oldest China-state relationship organization in the United States. And of course, Washingtonians are proud that we elected the 21st governor of the state of Washington, Ambassador Gary Locke, who was the first Chinese-American governor in the history of the United States of America. So, China, as we know, is also Washington State's #1 two-way trading partner. And during my first year as governor, I traveled to China on a trade mission to continue that relationship, building on my predecessor's progress. And Chinese officials and business leaders were most welcoming during that trip, and I extended an open invitation to come visit us in Washington as well. And it is a delight now to see the fruits of that work, of billions of dollars of investment in the state of Washington. Thank you for that Chinese investment. Now, we know our peoples share many common attributes. We embrace technological innovation. We promote cutting-edge advances in clean energy, in global health, and in science. And we support the notion that collaboration amongst the world's brightest minds and the best research institutions can help us solve our most vexing global challenges. That's why we are so excited about the Global Innovation Exchange, a collaboration of my alma mater, the University of Washington, and Tsinghua University and Microsoft. For the first time, a Chinese research institute, university, has established a physical presence in the United States. And I was thrilled to be at the media announcement of that great enterprise. I know we have a full program this evening, including President Xi's remarks on U.S. China relations. Mr. President, I'm looking forward to your insights, and I very much appreciate the time you spent with governors today. That's most appreciated. So I'd like to close with a quote by President John F. Kennedy. And I think he encapsulated the spirit of our enterprise during this two-day visit. And he said this, quote, "For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future. And we are all mortal." And I think those words are today so appropriate as they were in 1963. And I would add the following: we all have an interest in developing and perfecting the clean energy economy of the future that we know our children's future are dependent upon. So our mutual challenges we are ready to embrace. We look forward to working with China for solutions of these challenges. And once again, welcome to Washington State. Xi Xi.
Ladies and gentlemen, President and CEO of Ford Motor Company and Chair of the U.S. China Business Council, Mark Fields.
Good evening. I'm Mark Fields, President and CEO of Ford Motor Company and the Chairman of the U.S. China Business Council. On behalf of the business community, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this dinner in honor of the President of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping. Now, in this room tonight, we have over 750 people who have traveled from all four corners of the United States to be here to welcome you, President Xi. And all of us are very committed to a successful U.S.-China relationship and stand ready to support a deepening of our already strong ties. Now, our strong economic relationship will serve as the foundation for the broader bilateral relationship, which is so critical at this point in time. Success in meeting the global challenges of today and in the years ahead depends greatly on how our two countries come together in support of common goals and also to resolve differences. And I am absolutely confident that the United States and China will meet this challenge. So thank you, President Xi, for your leadership, and we wish you, your wife, Madam Peng, and your entire delegation a very successful visit here in the United States. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to invite the United States Secretary of Commerce, Penny Pritzker, to come to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you to the National Committee on U.S. China Relations, the Washington State Welcoming Committee, and the U.S. China Business Council for organizing this event. President Xi, Madam Peng, on behalf of President Obama, I would like to welcome you to the United States. This is the beginning of an important trip, and we know that the people across the United States and China, and indeed around the world, are paying close attention. Over the last 3 decades, China's economic progress has been nothing short of extraordinary. In 1980, Chinese GDP stood at $202 billion. In 2014, it was over $10 trillion. In 1980, China's total trade was $30 billion. In 2014, China's total goods trade was $591 billion with just the United States. This growth was only possible because China's leaders made difficult choices to open and reform their economy, to allow private enterprises to develop, to permit foreign companies to invest in China, and to give greater transparency to the Chinese system. The result of these reforms was astounding economic growth that helped to lift 600 million Chinese out of poverty and changed the face of the country. Over the past 30 years, China has also benefited significantly from a rules-based international economic system and long-term investments from U.S. companies. Just last year, direct investments by American firms in China totaled over $60 billion. And this week, a number of significant deals are being announced alongside President Xi's visit that exemplify American companies' commitment to support China's development, both with capital and with world-class technologies. Nevertheless, we and our companies continue to have serious concerns about an overall lack of legal and regulatory transparency, inconsistent protection of intellectual property, discriminatory cyber and technology policies, and more generally, the lack of a level playing field across a range of sectors. We expect to have candid and constructive discussions on these matters in the coming days. But it is absolutely in our mutual economic self-interest to resolve these issues. Today, China has the second largest economy on the planet, and as we have seen in recent weeks, China's economic policy decisions have ramifications that are felt far beyond its shores. Years of bold and necessary Chinese reforms worked. They created a global exporting powerhouse. But those reforms and that model will not support China's growth at the level that the Chinese government wants and the world needs. Today, as the world's second largest economy, China cannot maintain that growth with an export-driven model. There simply is not enough global demand. This is an important moment. China's leaders have an opportunity to demonstrate that through their actions, that they are committed to the compelling vision of the third and fourth plenums, and that they are prepared to partner with the United States to support a rules-based international economic system. We have heard news in recent days regarding reform of state-owned enterprises, as well as renewed commitment to easing restrictions on foreign investment and improving the domestic business environment. If these signals are any indication, China appears ready to take steps to accelerate its transition from export and investment-led growth to greater reliance on Chinese households and consumers. If this transition becomes a reality, the Chinese people and the entire global economy stand to benefit greatly. The Obama administration is committed to having productive discussions with China, and we expect our conversations over the next several days to yield tangible progress in a number of important areas. But the measure of our relationship goes well beyond the basis of commitments in a fact sheet. We will evaluate our relationship based on progress we make expanding cooperation and constructively managing differences, and most importantly, in the actions each of us takes. We warmly welcome you and your delegation to the United States. President Obama and the whole of the American people look forward to this significant state visit. We all look forward to a productive and successful engagement. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chair and CEO of Hills and Company and Chair of the National Committee on U.S. China Relations, Ambassador Carla Hills.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Pritzker. It's wonderful to have you here, and you do a magnificent job on behalf of our country. Good evening, one and all. I'm Carla Hills, and I have the privilege of chairing the National Committee on U.S. China Relations. Since 1972, the National Committee made history by co-hosting the China's table tennis team in the United States, now known as the ping pong diplomacy. And we still continue to be one of the lead organizers for visits of distinguished Chinese leaders to the United States. And we're delighted to have that opportunity tonight. The National Committee believes strongly that bringing leaders of our two nations together is indispensable to building the relationships that make it possible to solve key bilateral and global issues. To introduce our honored guests this evening, we have the great pleasure to call upon one of my dear friends, our 56th Secretary of State, who has played a dominant role in U.S. foreign policy for more than 6 decades. Beginning with his service in the U.S. Army in World War II, to his contributions as National Security Advisor and Secretary of State to President Nixon and later to President Ford, Henry Kissinger has devoted his life to the service of his country and to the quest for global peace. He has pioneered the policy of and negotiated a ceasefire and the Paris Peace Accords that contributed to the end of the Vietnam War, for which he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. His unannounced trip to Beijing in 1971 paved the way for President Nixon to come to China, meet with Premier Zhou Enlai and Chairman Mao, and to sign the Shanghai Communique. That paved the way to restoring diplomatic relations between China and the United States. And through his prolific writings and global travels, he continues to influence the thinking of critical foreign policy issues. Please join me in welcoming to the podium the very special American, Dr. Henry Kissinger, who will introduce our guest of honor, the distinguished President of the People's Republic of China.
President Xi Jinping, Madam Peng, and distinguished members of the Chinese delegation. The men and women who have come here from all over the United States are honored, Mr. President, that you have chosen to deliver a policy address in this great city, which is one of America's premier windows to Asia. When Chairman Mao met with President Nixon 45 years ago, I had the honor of being present. Their goal was to overcome the prolonged estrangement between our countries and to join hands in resisting a common potential adversary. That goal, essentially strategic in nature, was achieved. Of equal significance, China launched a bold program of reform and openness whose goal seemed visionary at the time. In a few decades, the dedication of the Chinese people, the convictions of a succession of wise leaders, and collaboration across the Pacific turn them into reality. Your arrival, Mr. President, marks yet another historic turning point. Great achievements are often preceded by a kind of dreams. And you, Mr. President, have put forward what you describe as a dream of 2/100ths of China's future. The first 100 will mark the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party, and it will be reached in 2021. And its goal is for China to be moderately prosperous, in the words of the President, that is double the GNP of 2010. The second 100 will be the centenary of the proclamation of the Communist State in 2049, which is to establish China as a fully developed member of the community of nations. Together, these goals will mark another revolutionary advance for China, and they will also increase enormously the interaction between the United States and China. In the economic sphere, President Xi, on a previous visit to America as Vice President, described economic interdependence as the ballast and propeller of the overall relationship. This ever-deepening economic relationship is signified by the many Chinese and American business and educational leaders and technical experts that have assembled for sessions tomorrow. This expresses the growing realization that each of us, China and the United States, has a stake in the other's economic growth. That a win-win approach to economic policy is in the self-interest of both countries and to the benefit of mankind. In the political field, this win-win approach is equally essential. President Xi has described this challenge as the need to establish a new global order in which partnership between potential adversaries replaces antagonism. This is the deepest challenge of our era. And this is why your state visit, Mr. President, will be an important step in the process of lifting our relationship from the day-to-day solving of problems to the overarching vision of creating a new world order. As you and President Obama meet in Washington, all of us wish both leaders great success in undertaking an analysis of global crisis, exploring the requirements of world order, and the steps needed to promote peace in the world and progress for mankind. Mr. President, in this spirit, we look forward to your remarks. It is my great honor to introduce the distinguished President Xi Jinping to this audience.
Henry Kissinger, Governor J. Inslee of the state of Washington, Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker, Mayor Ed Murray of Seattle, Chairwoman Carla Hills of the National Committee on U.S. China Relations, Chairman Mark Fields of the U.S. China Business Council, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Kissinger, for your kind introduction. Dr. Kissinger has always been able to come up with some new observations. His introduction has really given me a new perspective to look at myself. It is great to be among so many friends, old and new, in the state of Washington and the city of Seattle, the first leg of my state visit to the United States. Let me begin by extending to you and through you to all the American people my cordial greetings and best wishes. I am no stranger to the state of Washington and the city of Seattle. Known as the Evergreen State and the Emerald City, here you have got the majestic Mount Rainier and the charming Lake Washington. The film, Sleepless in Seattle, has made the city almost a household name in China. Besides, Washington is the leading state in U.S. exports to China, and China the #1 trading partner of the Port of Seattle. Washington and Seattle have become an important symbol of the friendship between Chinese and American people and the win-win cooperation between the two countries. As a Chinese saying goes, the fire burns high when everyone brings wood to it. It is the loving care and hard work of the national governments, local authorities, friendly organizations, and people from all walks of life in both countries that have made China-U.S. relations flourish. In particular, the National Committee on U.S. China Relations, the U.S. China Business Council, the U.S. China Policy Foundation, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the China General Chamber of Commerce USA, the Committee of 100, the China Institute, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Asia Society, the Brookings Institution, and many other friendly groups and individuals have made untiring efforts over the years to promote friendly relations and cooperation between the two countries and brought this relationship to this far. Let me pay high tribute and express my heartfelt gratitude to all the local governments, social organizations, universities, think tanks, and people from all sectors of society who have dedicated themselves to the cause of China-U.S. friendship. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, since the founding of the People's Republic, especially since the beginning of reform and opening up, China has set out on an extraordinary journey, and the Chinese of my generation have had some first-hand experience. Towards the end of 1960s, when I was in my teens, I was sent from Beijing to work as a peasant in a small village of Liangjiahe near Yan'an of Shanxi province, where I spent 7 years. At that time, the villagers and I lived in earth caves and slept on earth beds. Life was very hard. There was no meat in our diet for months. I knew what the villagers wanted the most. Later, I became the village's party secretary and began to lead the villagers in production. One thing I wished most at the time was to make it possible for the villagers to eat meat to their heart's content. But it was very difficult for such a wish to come true in those years. At the Spring Festival early this year, I returned to the village. It was a different place now. I saw blacktop roads. Now living in houses, bricks and tiles, the villagers had internet access. Elderly folks had basic old age care, and all villagers had medical care coverage. Children were in school. Of course, meat was readily available. This made me keenly aware that the Chinese dream is, after all, a dream of the people. We can fulfill the Chinese dream only when we link it with our people's yearning for a better life. What has happened in Liangjiahe is but a microcosm of the progress China has made through reform and opening up. In a little more than 3 decades, we have turned China into the world's second-largest economy, lifted 1.3 billion people from a life of chronic shortage, and brought them initial prosperity and unprecedented rights and dignity. This is not only a great change in the lives of the Chinese people, but also a huge step forward in human civilization and China's major contribution to world peace and development. At the same time, we are soberly aware that China is still the world's largest developing country. Our per capita GDP is only 2/3 that of the global average and 1/7 that of the United States, ranking around 80th in the world. By China's own standard, we still have over 70 million people living under the poverty line. If measured by the World Bank standard, the number would be more than 200 million. Over 70 million citizens live on basic living allowances, and the number of people with disabilities exceeds 85 million. During the past 2 years, I have been to many poor areas in China and visited many poor families. I wouldn't forget the look in their eyes, longing for a decent, happy life. I know that we must work still harder before all our people can live a better life. That explains why development remains China's top priority. To anyone charged with the governance of China, their primary mission is to focus all the resources on improving people's living standard and gradually achieve common prosperity. To this end, we have proposed the 2 centenary goals mentioned by Dr. Kissinger, namely to double the 2010 GDP and per capita income of the Chinese and complete the building of a moderately prosperous society by 2020, and to build a prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced and harmonious modern socialist country and realize the great renewal of the Chinese nation by the middle of the century. Whatever we do now is aimed at fulfilling these goals. To succeed in completing the building of a moderately prosperous society in all respects, we must comprehensively deepen reform, advance the law-based governance, and apply strict party discipline. That is what our proposed 4-pronged strategy is all about. Since you are all interested in such issues as the direction of China's development and China's policy orientation, Let me take this opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts in this regard. China's economy will stay on a steady course with fairly fast growth. The Chinese economy is still operating within a proper range. It grew by 7% in the first half of the year, and this growth rate remains one of the highest in the world. This has not come by easily given the complex and volatile situation in the world economy. At present, all economies are facing difficulties, and our economy is also under downward pressure. But this is only a problem in the course of progress. We will take coordinated steps to achieve stable growth, deepen reform, adjust the structure, improve livelihood, and prevent risks, while strengthening and innovating macro regulation to keep the growth at a medium to high rate. Currently, China is continuing to move forward in its new type of industrialization, digitalization, urbanization, and agricultural modernization. With a high savings rate, a huge consumption potential, hardworking population, and a rising proportion of middle-income people, now we have 300 million middle-income earners in China. China enjoys an enormous space for its services sector to grow in terms of the market size and potential. China will focus more on improving the quality and the efficiency of economic growth and accelerating the shift of growth model and adjustment in economic structure. We will lay greater emphasis on innovation and consumption-driven growth. In this way, we will solve the problem of unbalanced, uncoordinated, and unsustainable development and enable the Chinese economy to successfully transform itself and maintain strong momentum of growth. Recent abnormal ups and downs in China's stock market has caused wide concern. Stock prices fluctuate in accordance with their inherent laws, and it is the duty of the government to ensure an open, fair, and just market order and prevent massive panic from happening. This time, the Chinese government took steps to stabilize the market and contain panic in the stock market, and thus avoided a systemic risk. Mature markets in various countries have tried similar approaches. Now, China's stock market has reached the phase of self-recovery and self-adjustment. On the 11th of August, China moved to improve its RMB central parity quotation mechanism, giving the market a greater role in determining the exchange rate. Our efforts have achieved initial success in correcting the exchange rate deviation. Given the economic and financial situation at home and abroad, there is no basis for continuous depreciation of the RMB. We will stick to the purpose of our reform to have the exchange rate decided by market supply and demand and allow the RMB to float both ways. We are against competitive depreciation or currency war. We will not lower the RMB exchange rate to boost export. To develop the capital market and improve the market-based pricing mechanism of the RMB exchange rate is the direction of our reform. This will not be changed by the recent fluctuation in the stock market or the stock market. The key to China's development lies in reform. Our reform is aimed at modernizing the country's governance system and governance capabilities so that the market can play a decisive role in the allocation of resources. The government can play a better role, and there is faster progress in building the socialist market economy, democracy, advanced culture, harmonious society, and sound environment. At the third plenum of the 18th Party Central Committee in 2013, we decided on an overarching plan for deepening reform featuring over 330 measures. In 2014, 80 major reform items were by and large completed. In the first half of this year, we rolled out over 70 key reform programs, with their effects gradually becoming evident. when it comes to the toughest reforms, only those with courage will carry the day. We have the resolve and the guts to press ahead and take reform forward. We will stick to the direction of market economy reform and continue to introduce bold and result-oriented reform measures concerning the market, taxation, finance, investment and financing, pricing, opening up, and people's livelihood. China will never close its open door to the outside world. Opening up is a basic state policy of China. Its policies of attracting foreign investment will not change, nor will its pledge to protect the legitimate rights and interests of foreign investors in China and to improve its services for foreign companies operating in China. We respect the international business norms and practice of non-discrimination, observe the WTO principle of national treatment commitment, treat all market players, including foreign invested companies, fairly, and encourage transnational corporations to engage in all forms of cooperation with Chinese companies. We will address legitimate concerns of foreign investors in a timely fashion, protect their lawful rights and interests, and work hard to provide an open and transparent legal and policy environment, an efficient administrative environment, and a level playing field in the market, with a special focus on IPR protection, so as to broaden the space of cooperation between China and the United States and other countries. China will follow the basic strategy of the rule of law in governance. Law is the very foundation of governance. We will coordinate our efforts to promote the rule of law in governance and administration, put the building of the country, the government, and society on a solid basis of the rule of law, build greater trust in the judicial system, and ensure that human rights are respected and effectively upheld. China will give fair treatment to foreign institutions and foreign companies in the country's legislative, executive, and judicial practices. We're ready to discuss rule of law issues with the U.S. side in the spirit of mutual learning for common progress. China is a staunch defender of cybersecurity. It is also a victim of hacking. The Chinese government will not, in whatever form, engage in commercial thefts or encourage or support such attempts by anyone. Both commercial cyber theft and hacking against the government networks are crimes that must be punished in accordance with law and relevant international treaties. The international community should, on the basis of mutual respect and mutual trust, work together to build a peaceful, secure, open, and cooperative cyberspace. China is ready to set up a high-level joint dialogue mechanism with the United States on fighting cyber crimes. China recognizes the positive role played by foreign non-profit organizations, NPOs. So long as their activities are beneficial to the Chinese people, we will not restrict or prohibit their operations, but will protect their operations through legislation and protect their legitimate rights and interests. On their part, foreign NPOs in China need to obey Chinese law and carry out activities in accordance with law.
China will continue fighting corruption. As I once said, one has to be very strong if he wants to strike the iron. The blacksmith referred to here is the Chinese Communist Party. The fundamental aim of the party is to serve the people heart and soul. The party now has over 87 million members, and unavoidably it has problems of one kind or another. If we let these problems go unchecked, we will risk losing the trust and support of the people. That is why we demand strict enforcement of party discipline as the top priority of governance. In our vigorous campaign against corruption, we have punished both tigers and flies, corrupt officials irrespective of ranking, in response to our people's demand. This has nothing to do with power struggle. In this case, there is no house of cards. China is ready to cooperate closely with the international community in fighting corruption and tracking down fugitives. The Chinese people look to the U.S. for support and coordination so that corrupt elements will be denied an overseas safe haven. China will keep to the path of peaceful development. We have just commemorated the 70th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War. An important lesson history teaches us is that peaceful development is the right path, while any attempt to seek domination or hegemony through force is against the historical trend and doomed to failure. The Chinese recognized as early as 2,000 years ago that though a country is now strong, bellicosity will lead to its ruin. China's defense policy is defensive in nature, and its military strategy features active defense. Let me reiterate here that no matter how developed it could become, China will never seek hegemony or engage in expansion. To demonstrate our commitment to peaceful development, I announced not long ago that the size of China's military will be cut by 300,000. China is ready to work with other countries to build a new type of international relations with win-win cooperation at its core, replacing confrontation and domination with win-win cooperation, and adopting a new thinking of building partnerships so as to jointly open up a new vista of common development and shared security. As far as the existing international system is concerned, China has been a participant, builder, and contributor. We stand firmly for the international order and system that is based on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. A great number of countries, especially developing countries, want to see a more just and equitable international system. But it doesn't mean that they want to unravel the entire system or start all over again. Rather, what they want is to reform and improve the system to keep up with the times. This should serve the common interest of all countries and mankind as a whole. China has benefited from the international community in development, and China in turn has made its contribution to global development. Our Belt and Road Initiative, our establishment of the Silk Road Fund, and our proposal to set up the AIIB are all aimed at helping the common development of all countries rather than seeking some kind of spheres of political influence. The Belt and Road Initiative is open and inclusive. We welcome participation of the U.S. and other countries and international organizations. We have vigorously promoted economic integration in the Asia-Pacific and the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific in particular, because we want to facilitate the shaping of a free, open, convenient, and dynamic space for development in the Asia-Pacific. We called for an outlook of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security because we want to work with other countries in the region and the rest of the international community to maintain peace and security in the Asia-Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, in our Sunnylands meeting in 2013, President Obama and I reached the important agreement to jointly build a new model of major country relationship between the two countries. This was a major strategic choice we made together on the basis of historical experience, our respective national conditions, and the prevailing trend of the world. Over the past 2 years and more, the two sides have acted in accordance with the agreement, steadily moved forward bilateral coordination and cooperation in various fields, and made important progress. We worked hand in hand to cope with the aftermath of the international financial crisis and promoted global economic recovery. We deepened pragmatic exchanges cooperation in all fields, which brought about tangible benefits to the two peoples. Last year, bilateral trade, two-way investment, stock, and total number of personnel exchanges all hit a record high. We maintained close communication and coordination on such international and regional hotspot issues as the Iranian nuclear issue, the Korean nuclear issue, South Sudan, Afghanistan, Middle East, as well as such global issues as fighting against Ebola and countering terrorism. As an old Chinese saying goes, peaches and plums do not talk, yet a path is formed beneath them. These worthy fruits of cooperation across the Pacific Ocean speaks eloquently to the vitality and potential of China-U.S. relations. This leads to the question, what shall we do to advance the new model of major country relationship between China and the U.S. from a new starting point, and how we can work together to promote world peace and development? The answer is to stick to the right direction of such a new model of relationship and make gradual yet solid progress. An ancient Chinese said, after taking into account the past, the future, and the normal practices, a decision can be made. A number of things are particularly important for our efforts. First, we must read each other's strategic intentions correctly. Building a new model of major country relationship with the United States that features non-confrontation, non-conflict, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation is the priority of China's foreign policy. We want to deepen mutual understanding with the U.S. on each other's strategic orientation and development path. We want to see more understanding and trust, less estrangement and suspicion, in order to forestall misunderstanding and miscalculation. We should strictly base our judgment on facts, lest we become victims to hearsay, paranoid, or self-imposed bias. There is no such thing as the so-called Thucydides trap in the world. But should major countries time and again make the mistakes of strategic miscalculation, they might create such traps for themselves. Second, we must firmly advance win-win cooperation. Cooperation is the only right choice to bring about benefits. But cooperation requires mutual accommodation of each other's interests and concerns and the quest of the great common ground of converging interest. If China and the U.S. cooperate well, they can become a bedrock of global stability and a booster of world peace. Should they enter into conflict or confrontation, it would lead to disaster for both countries and the world at large. The areas where we should and can cooperate are very broad. For instance, we should help improve the global governance mechanism and work together to promote sustained growth of world economy and maintain stability in the global financial market. We should conclude as soon as possible a balanced and high-quality BIT, deepen the building of a new type of male-to-male relations, expand pragmatic cooperation on clean energy and environmental protection, strengthen exchanges on law enforcement, anti-corruption, health, and local affairs, and tap the cooperation potential in infrastructural development. We should deepen communication and cooperation at the United Nations, APEC, G20, and other multilateral mechanisms, as well as on major international and regional issues and global challenges, so as to make a bigger contribution to world peace, stability, and prosperity. Third, we must manage our differences properly and effectively. As a Chinese saying goes, the sun and the moon shine in different ways, yet their brightness is just right for the day and night, respectively. It is precisely because of so many differences that the world has become such a diverse and colorful place, and that the need to broaden common ground and iron out differences has become so important. A perfect, pure world is non-existent, since disagreements are a reality people have to live with. China and the U.S. do not see eye to eye on every issue, and it is unavoidable that we may have different positions on some issues. What matters is how to manage the differences, and what matters most is that we should respect each other, seek common ground while reserving differences, take a constructive approach to enhance understanding and expand consensus, and spare no effort to turn differences into areas of cooperation. Fourth, we must foster friendly sentiments among the peoples. People-to-people relations underpin state-to-state relations. Though geographically far apart, our peoples boast a long history of friendly exchanges. Some 230 years ago, Empress of China, a U.S. merchant ship, sailed across the vast oceans to the shores of China. Some 150 years ago, tens of thousands of Chinese workers joined their American counterparts in building the transcontinental Pacific Railway. Some 30 years ago, China and the United States, as allies in World War II, fought shoulder to shoulder to defend world peace and justice. In that war, thousands of American soldiers laid down their precious lives for the just cause of the Chinese people. We will never forget the moral support and invaluable assistance the American people gave to our just resistance against aggression, and our struggle for freedom and independence. The Chinese people have always held American entrepreneurship and creativity in high regards. In my younger years, I read the Federalist Papers by Alexander Hamilton and Common Sense by Thomas Paine. I was interested in the life story and thinking of George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, and other American statesmen. I also read works of Henry David Thoreau, Walt Whitman, Mark Twain, and Jack London. I was most captivated by Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, and its descriptions of howling wind, driving rain, roaring waves, small boat, and the old man and sharks. So when I visited Cuba for the first time, I paid a special visit to the breakwater in Kohima, where Hemingway wrote the book. And in my second visit of Cuba, I dropped by the bar Hemingway frequented and ordered his favorite rum with mint on rocks. Mojito. I just wanted to feel for myself what had been on his mind and the very place he was as he wrote those stories. I believe that it is always important to make an effort to get a deep understanding of the cultures and civilizations that are different from our own. The Chinese character Ren, or people, is in the shape of two strokes supporting each other. The foundation of China-U.S. friendship has its roots in the people, and its future rests with the youth. I want to announce here that China supports the initiative of sending a total of 50,000 Chinese and American students to study in each other's countries over the next 3 years. China and the U.S. will launch a China-U.S. Year of Tourism in 2016. China, on its part, will create more favorable conditions for closer people-to-people exchanges. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kissinger wrote in his book, World Order, and I quote, that each generation will be judged by whether the greatest, most consequential issues of the human condition have been faced. And Martin Luther King said, the time is always right to do the right thing. Today, we have come once again to a historical juncture. Let us work together to bring about an even better future for China-U.S. relations and make an even greater contribution to the happiness of our two peoples and the well-being of the world, of the people, the world over. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, City of Seattle Mayor Edward Murray.
Thank you, President Xi, for those incredible remarks. We are doubly honored in Seattle this evening, first because you've chosen Seattle as a first stop on your visit to the United States, and second because you've chosen this forum to express these very important policy ideas. The President mentioned an American movie about Seattle. I want to mention a Chinese movie about Seattle. I think this week should be called Beijing in Seattle. This evening, President Xi has described the importance of U.S.-China cooperation on a series of issues, including trade and the environment. Cooperation between our two countries is vital, not just for our own citizens, but for the world. Together, China and the U.S. can create stronger global commitments, not just among ourselves, but among nations. It is inevitable that there will be differences of opinion, but the key is to continue the dialogue. and we have found that what we agree on far outweighs our differences. Just last week, I traveled to Los Angeles to meet with mayors from across America and China to discuss strategies on climate change. That productive meeting happened because of the close personal relationship between President Xi and President Obama that led to that important meeting in Los Angeles. Climate change is a critical issue of our time. We live in a small planet. The causes of climate change affect all of us and are not restricted by national borders. We must work together to reduce our emissions and adapt to the changing climate. We will continue that dialogue between cities. Next year, I and a delegation from Seattle will make my first official visit to China. Every day, Chinese tourists come to Seattle and see for themselves what we have to offer. Particularly, they like to explore the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest. Students and researchers come to the University of Washington in Seattle, which was recently recognized as the 4th most innovative research institution in the world. The university is a primary driver of our economy, and it has built lasting partnerships with China, academic as well as personal, that will outlive all of us. Business people come to China to explore economic opportunities and form new partnerships that will benefit both of our nations. And of course, all of these visitors and all of these business opportunities build on the proud legacy of Chinese pioneers and Chinese Americans who helped make Seattle the city it is today. All of us here, in our own way, are committed to working with you, President Xi, and the people of China to build those people-to-people ties that you mentioned and bring our countries closer together. President Xi and Madam Peng, esteemed members of the delegation, we thank you for coming to Seattle. We are honored that you chose Seattle, and we hope that you will enjoy your time in the city of Seattle. Thank you very much.
Please welcome former Governor of the State of Washington, former U.S. Secretary of Commerce, and former U.S. Ambassador to China, Gary Locke.
Welcome President Xi and Madam Peng to Seattle, my hometown, and our great state of Washington. We consider this the real Washington, the better Washington. We in Seattle and this Washington are proud of our deep and long-standing ties, not just in trade, but more importantly, culturally and people to people. Governor Inslee in his beginning talked about some of the great hallmarks of the U.S. China relationship, and especially with Washington State. I have to put in a plug for one more. When Boeing Company first created its position of aeronautical engineer, that very first aeronautical engineer, I believe in the year 1916, was a Chinese person educated at MIT, a Chinese national. So President Xi, we have many engineers and machinists working at Boeing who are Chinese, and of course people of all nationalities. So when China buys Boeing airplanes, you're helping creating jobs for the people, Chinese Americans and others in our great state. Let us all rise for a toast to President Xi and Madam Peng. And while we don't have quite our Washington wine served yet, we're featuring wine from Chateau Saint Michel, but with this champagne, a toast to President Xi and Madam Peng. To the leader of China, the world's oldest civilization, but also one of its most modern, we wish you great success in raising the quality of life and the standard of living for the Chinese people, achieving the China dream. We look forward to stronger and deeper U.S.-China relationship that benefits both of our peoples and indeed the entire world, because the people of the world are looking for leadership from both China and the United States, working in partnership together in solving the pressing issues facing our world and indeed our planet. To a stronger and deeper U.S.-China relationship, cheers. Let's enjoy our dinner.